be able to talk to you in this manner. It's going to be an exciting time for me.
Well, it is for me too, Dave.
First of all, let's verify your birth date. I've got listed as May 19th or March 19th.
May. Taurus the bull. Read about Taurians.
Oh, they're kind-hearted, exuberant.
Patience?
Yeah. Loyal. As Irene Ambergate, growing up in Leicester County, Kentucky during the 20s, can you give me your first recollections of music during your childhood?
Well, my mother and father sang, and my uncle and my grandfather had a quartet.
Oh, yeah.
And they sang hymns at the all-day singings, and they'd go around. As a child, I was present at so many of those things. My father played five-string banjo, which I just loved, and he sang the old folk songs just at home around for the kids and everything. And I just thought I would just die if I didn't hurry up and get a guitar. And of course, we was poor as Job's turkey. We was way back there in the sticks, and I had a little pet cave. I'm going to tell you this little story. I don't know if it's ever been printed or not. I had a little pet cave, and I had trained it to where it would come up off the top of the mountain when I'd call its name. It'd come down to the backyard, and I'd holler out my bedroom window and tell it good night. It was really just a little love, and I had just spoiled and loved it so much. But on my way to school, I was in grade school, and on my way to school, I had to walk down one holler and up another one. There wasn't no school buses up in there, So this boy lived right near the school, and I had to pass by his house to go to school every morning. Willard Hawkins was his name. One day I passed by, and he had this little guitar over his shoulder, and I just went crazy about that guitar. Now, it was one of these that you could probably buy for $3.98, but it made such a big impression on me. It had the paintings. You may have seen them, or you may not be too young to remember this far back, when they painted Hawaiian girls and the grass skirts and stuff on them, and they had a rope for a guitar cord to go around your neck.
Yeah, right.
But it didn't make no difference. It still sounded good to me. It played music, and I wanted that. So I went back home and I told my mother about it. She said, they've been talking about, his daddy's been talking about wanting that little cave, so why don't you see if you might work out a little thing, you might trade the cave for the guitar. And that was awful heart-touching to me because I was so attached to this little cave. And I mulled it over and I slept on that for a few nights, and the thought come to me, well, now I can get that guitar, I can let him have Pet, and she'll be in there. I had to go right by their pasture ground to go to school, and I can see her every day.
Right.
So I could pet her at the fence. So I made the decision I would trade for the guitar and $5. So that's how I got my first guitar.
You must have really cherished it.
Oh, yes. And it took the $5 to show you how much I loved music. I took the $5 to put it down on an old piano.
Oh, yeah.
So my sisters could learn to play something, but they didn't follow playing the piano because they loved more of the stringed instruments too. And my mother sold a bunch of hens and got a fiddle for one of my sisters, and from there we started doing little local shows. We lived in a coal mining town.
Great.
And we started doing little local shows for the churches and the schools and the coal mining meetings and things like that. And we got an invitation to come to an amateur contest in Lexington, Kentucky. And you'll never know, Dave, how we got that message. We had an uncle that was worked for the railroad, worked an engineer or something on the railroad, on the train that came to Neon, Kentucky, where we lived there in Letcher County. Made the run from Lexington into Neon. And he contacted us and said that this man wanted us to come to an amateur contest in Lexington, Kentucky. And if we won, we'd get $15. Now, back then, $15 was a great big thing. So my daddy packed us all up in the car, and we go to Lexington, and we won it. So we got the job, and the job was, we didn't know what we was getting into.
Yeah.
But the man that we took the job for, worked for, he paid for our rent and our food, which was very minor. And I ate so many eggs because they was 11 cents a dozen that it was years before I could stand and look at eggs. But he never paid us any money in our hand at all.
Oh, yeah, so this is a trade-off. So.
Yeah, sorry. And many a night, we'd be in that apartment, and we'd all cry ourselves to sleep. Yeah. We couldn't write back home and tell our mother and daddy these circumstances, because then they'd come and get us. And we thought, well, we're going to make it some way, And we struggled it out, and we starved quite a bit, compared to the way we always ate well at home. We lived in the country. But from there, then we went to Bluefield, West Virginia, and we graduated a little bit in our money. We did a little better there. At least we got paid something other than just eggs and a place to sleep, you know. So, from Bluefield, West Virginia, we get a call to come to Renfro Valley, Kentucky, and for Mr. John Lair. We worked there for a while as the Coon Creek Girls. And then he organized a similar program to be started in Atlanta, Georgia, called the WSB Barn Dance. So he decided he would move us to Atlanta, and he needed talent to start the show off. So he moved us to Atlanta. And there was where the name Martha Carson was born. They had named us, when we got there, our picture was in the paper, Minnie, Maddie, and Martha.
Right.
So the three of us sat down and said, now who's going to be Minnie, and who's going to be Maddie, and who's going to be Martha? Well, I wound up Martha. So I wound up working in Atlanta at WSB there for 9 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And you start off as the Hoot Owl Holler
Hoot
Girls?
Owl Holler Girls, right.
And then with
he was trying to follow his format that he had been successful with as the Coon Creek Girls in Renfro Valley, you see.
And then you teamed up with James Roberts Carson.
Right.
So from Irene Ambergay came Martha Carson.
Right.
There were certain experiences that sort of changed you from Irene Ambergay into Martha Carson, the radio experiences, like.
Well, no, just the thing that it was that brought about the name Martha was that John Lair thought we ought to have names that would go good in print, you know, instead of our original names, Irene, Bertha, and Opal. Minnie, Maddie, and Martha, the Hoot Owl Holler Girls, you know. So that gave it a little bit better thing for print. And then after about 7 years at WSB, I signed a recording contract with Capitol Records as under the Duet name. And the Duet severed relations in 50, I believe it was in 50. And at that time, we'd moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and was doing the Midday Merry-Go-Round show. And when the Duet broke up, I remained there at WNOX. It was there that I must tell you this. It's kind of, sometimes it's kind of hard to tell this, but I think I should. I was married to the partner that I was recording with, you know. He was, at that time, my husband. But the marriage went on the rocks. And we had quite a bit of success in that we sang the spiritual songs and recorded them. We had several hits with Capitol Records. And he became more or less a disbeliever in religion.
Oh, yeah.
And I could not tolerate this. So he began to behave in ways that I could not live with. In fact, he just denounced the fact that there was a God. You know. And this was, I have a strong spiritual belief. So when I decided that it just had to end, he left and went to West Virginia, and he got a job playing with Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper at that time. They were in Wheeling, West Virginia. I stayed on. But I had suffered for 2 or 3 years trying to make the thing straighten out because we were successful. And I had been raised from the old school. That, you know, divorce is just not the thing. And I was trying to make it work best I could. And even after doctors had told me if I didn't get away from him, I would have a nervous breakdown. And on many occasions I would lose my voice to where I couldn't even speak above a whisper from my nerves, you know. But I stayed with him and tried 2 or 3 years after I was told that. And then finally when it was severed, I stayed with him but during those trying time because basically and wholeheartedly of my religious belief and for the sake of our fans, because we had children named after us all over the state of Georgia and Alabama and Kentucky, Florida, you know, all the southern states. And even children would name their little pets after us. So I thought, well, if they knew, you know, what I was going through with, but I couldn't let them know. So I kept it all buried inside, and as a result, it injured my health at that time. So when it was all over and he left, and I stood up to sing my first solo on the Midday Merry-Go-Round, I was highly criticized by one lady that came to it was a live audience participation show. She was in the audience this particular day, and my sister was working with me, and my brother-in-law, and Bill Carlisle. So we did the Midday Merry-Go-Round, and we were scheduled to leave immediately after that to go across the Great Smoky Mountains to do a show in North Carolina that night. And they had said, don't lose any time getting out of the auditorium. We've got to really get started early. So I was the last one out of the auditorium because someone had stopped me for an autograph. And I can never ignore somebody that's a fan, you know. So when I got out to the car, they were all just buzzing and talking, and the minute I walked up, it all got they clammed up. It was all silence, and I thought, oh me, they're mad at me because I'm late getting out here, you know. And I said, I apologize for my delay. And they said, oh, it's not that. And so we get in the car and start out of town, and Bill Carlisle says, Maddie, why don't you tell her what it is? She'll feel better if you'll just tell her. She says, no, I'm not going to do it. This kept me in suspense even more, you know. So finally Bill said, if you don't tell her, I'm going to tell her. Said it'll make her feel better. So just before we get to Gatlinburg, the foot of the Great Smoky Mountains, Bill Carlisle told me what had happened. He said this lady that was in the audience, and saw me get up and sing a solo, went up to the owner of the radio station and said, if you ever send a show to Morristown, Tennessee, about 40 miles out of Knoxville, she said, if you ever send a show there and Martha Carson's on, nobody will ever come out there to see it. And said if there was anything to her, she would have left when her husband did, or she would have kept him here with her. You know, and this just really, after those years prior that I suffered for the sake of not hurting my fans, then this awful hurt hits me at the lowest ebb, you know, when I'm already crushed. Right. So I began to cry. And I guess the tears would have filled my shoe, and that'd be a pretty big load of tears. But I cried more than halfway up the mountain. And all of a sudden, it was just like a whole new world just came down on me. And I knew it was an inspiration from God because the thought came to my mind, I'm satisfied, and you're satisfied. And there's where the song was born. Right. And I began writing. And you know what I wrote Satisfied on? No. Well, I couldn't find a piece of paper. Yeah. And to this day, I still have this hang-up when I have inspiration for a song. I don't have a pen or a paper. So I looked for a paper. And all I could find was a little old blank check, a little out of a hand checkbook on the floor of Bill Carlisle's car that we were traveling in. I was in the back seat. It had mud shoe prints all over it. I picked it up and dusted it off and turned it lengthwise and wrote Satisfied. Really nice. And immediately, the tears were gone. The tears were gone. When we got to Bryson City, North Carolina that night, I taught it to him backstage and we sang it. Really? Wow. Until this day, I can sing that song when I'm at the lowest ebb and hurt the most about anything. And, you know, immediately it has a healing power to me. And I think maybe the reason that it was the hit that it was, and it's still enjoying a good success, is that so many people have lived a vein in their life similar to what I suffered through. So God gave me the comforting words, and especially in the last verse, if my friends, they all forsake me. You remember the lyrics. Right. So that was it. I thought I needed to tell you that.
Well, we reached 1951 now. As I said, your success as a solo really took off with your capital hit. Consolidating this success on record, you also became a star of the Grand Ole Opry. Can you tell me some of the experiences working on this legendary stage and radio show?
I'm going to tell you another trying thing that happened. Now, my life is not everything it has been trying, but this, I believe this way. In everything that we do, in every bit of happiness, in every bit of joy, there's always sorrow before it. There's always that darkness before the dawn. Really. So, they had called me upon the success of the record being so popular, of Satisfied. WSM had called me to come and do a guest spot on the Grand Ole Opry. And, of course, I was playing the little towns surrounding Knoxville every night and doing the midday merry-go-round every day. I took a terrible cold, and I coughed and coughed and coughed. Well, Bill Carlisle knew somebody, and I didn't know that I was allergic to penicillin at that time. So he went and got penicillin. I didn't have time to go to a doctor, you know, because we had to be on the road. So he went and got the penicillin. He thought that's what he took for a cold, so I took the penicillin. And I wound up in a hospital the week that I was supposed to come to the Grand Ole Opry. I wound up Wednesday in the hospital, terribly sick from the allergic reactions of penicillin. And so I was supposed to catch my flight to come to Nashville on that Saturday. And the doctor said he would in no way release me to make the trip. I'd have to travel at my own risk. So I got out of bed. I just said, if God be for me, who can be against me? And I just came with a prayer in my heart and caught the flight and came to Nashville. And from there, when I did my appearance on the Grand Ole Opry, Mr. Jim Denny, who was then the head of Grand Ole Opry, asked me would I stay over till Monday. I said sure, and come to his office, and there's where I signed to stay with the Grand Ole Opry.
You stayed for quite a few years.
Oh yes.
I was going to ask you about your folio here, and as far as the band members, like were they your recording and
no, now these particular. This is my sister Minnie, and this is her husband.
Oh yeah.
This is her husband. This guitar player is Blackie Bennett. He lived in Richmond, Virginia. This is George McCormick. He's from a little suburban town just out of Nashville. In fact, I was the first one ever to give him a professional job.
Oh yeah.
And later on, when I disbanded this unit, when I had my babies and disbanded, George started working for Porter White.
Oh yeah. Were they with you?
They were with me for many years. On the road, you know.
I was going to ask you about your records for Capitol. I find great pleasure and joy in relate as far as the Capitol period, which was 51 to 54. Can you tell me about the musicians that you used on the recordings and Ken Nelson?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had, at that time, he didn't enjoy the fame or the name that he has now. And I kid him a lot, and I said, just look what a big star I made out of you, because he was my lead guitar player. I'm talking to Chet Atkins.
Oh yeah, really?
I used him on all my records.
Really? I thought.
And I kid him all the time. Of course, it's not true that I made a star out of him or anything like that.
Oh, but still.
But it was an honor to have him play guitar for me.
Great. And I was going to say, Ken Nelson, he was sort of overseeing your recording project.
Ken Nelson. When I first signed with Capitol Records, D. Kilpatrick was the A&R man.
Oh yeah.
And he was the hardest man to record for.
Oh, yeah.
You would never get it right. He didn't know anything about music. He just, not that much technically about music, but he was one of these slave drivers.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how good it sounded, he thought it could be better.
Oh, yeah.
And many times I've done songs over with a duet till my fingers would be bleeding from playing the guitar.
Right. Yeah.
But when Ken Nelson came into the picture, I was the first time I'd ever recorded for Capitol under Ken Nelson's. So, when Mr. Nelson came into Nashville to record me, he just stayed back in the control room. D. Kilpatrick was always out there saying, do it this way, or do it that way, or do it this way, And Mr. Nelson was just the reverse. He stayed in the control room. And it was such a contrast that it began to bother me. After a few of the takes, I said, I came to the microphone, I said, Mr. Nelson, if I'm doing anything wrong, I would appreciate it if you would just tell me. Feel free to make suggestions, And he came back on his microphone in the control room. He said, Martha, he said, look, I came in here specifically for one thing, to get a Martha Carson record. And he said, if I tell you how to do it, I'm going to get a Ken Nelson record. Yeah, and I thought this was beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
he was like that with a lot of his artists.
Oh, yeah.
He let them...
But he let them get their
own
own natural feeling into the song, Right. And which I think all artists should be allowed that. Because God don't make any two of us just alike.
That's true, yeah. I was going to ask you about the gospel singers. Were they part of your troupe, or like they on your Capitol Records backing by the gospel singers?
Well, that was my group.
As far as they also played and sang instruments?
Oh yeah. Your coffee's got cold.
Yeah, I know.
Pour it out and I'll go get you some hot.
Oh, it's okay. I'll probably wait. So excited about hearing all these stories. Great. Well, your rise to fame as a soloist came when Hank Williams was at the height of his career.
Right. I was the second writer, Acuff Rose Publishing Company here in Nashville.
Right.
Ever signed. The first one was Hank Williams.
Right. And do you have any personal recollections of him?
Oh, sure.
You must have shared a stage.
My present husband was managing Hank Williams at the time of his death.
Oh, yeah.
And possibly if Hank Williams hadn't have met with his death, I would have probably never met or married my present husband.
Oh, yeah. Really? Was he with the Opry at the same time you were?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Here's a question we were talking about later, but did you find opposition or controversy during this time to your creative approach to gospel music with its exuberant musicianship and strong beat?
Yes, I definitely did. At the time that I recorded Satisfied in 1951, any gospel or religious song only had a piano for accompaniment. And this was not the way that I felt religion. I felt religion with a joy that, I had to let this feeling come through.
Right.
And so when I recorded Satisfied, and it hit, it was popular. And I went on tour with a lot of the gospel quartets from time to time. And I was criticized very highly by them and called a hillbilly, but that didn't bother me. That didn't bother me at all. I just get my guitar out and sing Satisfied for them.
I find your Capitol records are even different from the string band type of country music that was popular. Like,
right.
They don't sound like...
No, they had their own original sound.
That's what I mean. They had that strong beat. Your vocals are, to me, a revelation, just the way you sang.
Do you agree with me, David, that particular music to those records was a joyful noise?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
This is what I was striving for. Because in the Bible we're told to make a joyful noise to the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think that the beat and something people can feel that lifts them up is great.
I find that you could dance,
People
in a joyous...
People do, in a joyous way.
Right. You don't, I guess, especially during that time, you didn't get that.
Even to this day, really.
Yeah.
On one of my engagements, a little lady came up when I was autographing in Flint, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Martha, I've just got to tell you this. She said, I was just so downhearted and felt so low and depressed that I almost didn't come out to the show. But she said, I wanted to see you. And she said, I'm so glad that I came. She said, because I feel so much better now. She said, all that bubbling of joy that you did on the stage got to me, and I just feel so much better. So this is what I'm talking about. If you can lift a person's spirits, then all your work is not in vain.
That's right.
It is a joyous work.
Right. And the matter that you do it in is not really important, really.
Really?
I imagine your stage
The
performance...
Bible says, let your light so shine.
Yeah.
So if that's the way I feel my religion, I just have to let it shine.
Great. In 1955, you signed with RCA and recorded a lot of excellent material, too. There seems to be a change in the arrangements on your RCA records, say a sophistication with a pop sound. And you work with arrangers such as Neil Hefti.
Right.
Exciting and satisfying also. Can you tell me a little bit about that change in the music?
Well, yes. When I signed with RCA Victor, Mr. Steve Scholes insisted I move from Nashville to New York.
Oh, yeah.
And, which I didn't want to do because basically I'm Southern country,
Right.
And he brought me to New York. My husband decided that we should move up there because they wanted to put me in some real elite nightclubs and things like this. And I thought, well, what in the world? This was something very, very new to me and challenging.
Right.
So when I moved to New York, they decided to sign me with a theatrical agency there, one of the biggest, which they did. And they started putting me in places like the Moulin Rouge in Los Angeles and the Chez Paris in Chicago, the Chase Hotel in St. Louis. And I found it amazing that the only thing I had to change was go from a gingham dress to a full gown, evening gown. And they had to have, the musicians couldn't be country musicians. They had to be the ones that read it, because in different towns they had orchestras at that particular location that would back me up. I had to have all of my songs in musical form for them.
So you didn't have a traveling band? You just
No.
I
would just go into the orchestra with the orchestra at the location.
Right.
And they would follow the Neil Hefti or the Joe Reisman arrangements for the stage.
Right.
And it was a challenging thing for me. Memorable experience in my life because I had an opportunity to be in front of audiences that I never would have any other way.
Oh, yeah.
One time in particular, RCA booked me to play at strictly a Jewish.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Grossinger's, out in the Catskill Mountains. You know where it's at? Out in the Catskill Mountains.
Up in upstate New York.
Upstate New York, right. And they had their promotion man was named Bernie Miller.
Right.
So it was just a pleasant drive out from New York City. So he went with me and my husband. And he says, now Martha, he says, what are you going to sing when you get back? I said, I'm going to sing what I sing, He said, oh, for God's sakes, don't sing a spiritual. They'll stone you. They had all RCA Victor artists they was doing this showcase thing, And the audience was strictly television producers, and directors and so forth. So we got there kind of early. And at that time, Jim Reeves, who was on RCA, had Four Walls was real big. But and they had Diane Carroll, the colored girl.
Right.
had just joined RCA, and they had Vaughn Monroe, Julius LaRosa, excuse me, and quite a few big names, you know, and Martha Carson.
Right.
So we got there a little bit early, and the grounds at Grossinger is just gorgeous, great big old trees. We got there, we started walking around, and Bernie Miller, the promotion man from RCA, was on one side of me, and my husband was on the other side of me. And it was like two bumblebees after somebody. But they kept telling me, and I said, now just hush. Both of you, just be quiet. I want to think. Just let me think. I want to do a little meditating. Don't say a word. Let's just walk. And we walked around in the woods there a little while, under them great big old trees, in God's beautiful nature.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I just stopped. I said, I've got it. Oh, my God. He said, I hope it's right. I said, it is. I'm going to do 2 spirituals. He said, oh, you've lost your mind. So that night on the show, well, they had Jim Reeves doing the country hit. Right. They had Diane Carroll doing a pop hit, you know, and they had a jazz group doing something. They had Vaughn Monroe doing, a big thing that he was doing. Julius LaRosa singing one of his big ones and everything. And there wasn't nobody doing what God had given me my talent to do. So I was determined I was going to do them. He said, they'll throw rocks at you. And I said, well, they can just have to throw them then. So they used me to close the show. And them people that was going to stone me, sitting in this great big dinner atmosphere place with white linen tablecloth, absolutely, many of them stood up on top of the table. And I had to come back 5 times.
Wow.
So, you know, I believe that God leads us in our heart what's best. And if we go by what we feel is right inside, it'll be right. Because that's what the good Lord is telling us to do. And out of doing what I was inspired to do, I got 3 network television shows from that one appearance there. And each one of them wanted me to wear the same dress, sing the same songs. So, you know, something must have been right in the good Lord's eyes.
That's right. Sometimes we think that we're never going to be able to handle a situation. There, you know, your example, it comes through shining.
Right.
It's just amazing. I was going to ask you 2 questions about some RCA material. I'm just fascinated by your rendition of "I'm a Pilgrim," the Merle Travis song. It's so rock and roll, should I say? I just love it. How was that arranged?
Well, now I arranged that. Yeah. This song to me is more or less a Southern blues song. Yeah. I feel it as a blues song. Yeah. You know, because if you're a pilgrim, you are sort of lonesome.
Oh yeah, right.
You know, so that I injected this feeling into the song because I felt it that way.
Yeah, I love the arrangement.
Thank you.
And I was going to ask you about. I still haven't come across the Rock of My Soul LP. Do you recall the catalog number at all?
No, I wish I did.
Yeah.
But I have found out from looking so many places that it was right. A copy of it was right within reach all the time. Really? I should have checked with my mother. She has a copy.
Oh, very good.
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, David. I'm going to borrow her copy, and I'll run a cassette off on it and send it to you, so you'll have a copy of it.
Thanks very much. That's great. I guess Journey of the Sky, I find it has a lot of... First, I was going to ask you about how you recorded Give Up by Howard Goodman.
I used to sing... I love the Happy Goodman family. I just love them. They are absolutely what their name says, Happy Goodman family. We have done several tours together and had just wonderful times. And they were singing, Howard was singing the song to me. I believe it was Howard. Sang a little of the song. I said, oh, I want to record it. You know, I love it.
I see that.
Because that's what all of us really need to do. Just give up and let the Lord have His way, and things will all work out. That's right. And the song just hit me. I loved it. I could feel it.
I love the RCA material as much as although there's such a difference. It's just that your personality comes through in them, and I find as exciting as any music I've ever heard.
Basically, Dave, their idea was to broaden my audience. Right. You know, to dress it up with the orchestra. You know. To where that metropolitan people, like in New York or whatever, would accept it. So if that's what it takes, I'm in there right with them.
During the time you were with RCA, your sister Opal, as Jean Chappell, was recording for Sun Records and then RCA in a rock and roll style. She also was on a lot of the Alan Freed shows. Can you give me any of your thoughts and impressions about rock, like early rock and roll?
Well, actually, early rock and roll, I've been told, and I'm persuaded it's close to being right, that early rock and roll came by the way of spirituals, really, because it has a lot of the blues feeling in it that the Southern spirituals have. It has a lot of the happiness that some of the Southern folk spirituals have. And now the thing what nowadays they call the hard rock, to me that just don't have nothing.
No, really, yeah.
It's just noise. But the Elvis Presley days, Elvis Presley was a great singer. You could understand his lyrics. His story came through in a song. But today, whenever they just repeat the same line over and over, and it just gets louder and louder, it ceases to be a song to me.
And often they call it soul music, but it has very little to do with soul.
No, I don't find where in the world they find that, and how they could put soul to that.
This leads me on to talking about Elvis. I know you shared the bill with Elvis on at least a few occasions, small tours in the South when he was starting out in 1954, 55, and later he was on RCA at the same time as you. Can you give me your personal recollections of being on stage with him and personal recollections?
Oh, sure. We were booked on a tour down through southern Georgia and Florida. And at that time, Elvis was still on the Sun record label. And he only had one release out, was that When My Blue Moon Turns to Gold Again, which was a bluegrass tune originally, right? And Elvis came on stage, and there was excitement in the audience, but not to the degree that there was later when he came out with some other releases, after he went with RCA Victor. But between our shows, Elvis would come back and ask me to sit down and sing with him. And we would sing a lot of the old spirituals, He knew every song I had ever recorded. And he'd say, let's sing a little of this one and a little of that one, And he was a dear boy, a very nice person.
And I think he was influenced quite a bit by the music.
He told the Jordanaires, who was his backup singers, that he developed his style from Martha Carson. And this was a great thrill and a great compliment to me.
During the RCA years, you played in many diverse places and types of venues, from country fairs, national television, and big city nightclubs with performances that were packed with excitement. Can you tell me a little bit about your stage performances and your repertoire? Did you have certain songs that you...
Well, the agency that I was signed with, the one that managed me in New York, decided now, you better just don't go out there and do all spirituals. Do some of the old standards, like Look Down That Lonesome Road and some of these things like that, and maybe a country song or two with a big band arrangement. And then close your act with the spirituals. And they booked me in the most elite spot, the Shapery in Chicago. And this was an experience unreal. So I'll go in there with my agency, who had told me what to do. I do the show as they told me, and only doing like 3 spirituals at the end of my show. And immediately after I got off stage, the sound came backstage over the speaker from the manager of the Shapery for Martha Carson to come to his office. And I thought, well, this has been a short-lived experience here. I figured surely, I wasn't going to stay there for the 2 weeks I was contracted for. But when I went to his office, his name was Mr. Schott. I'll never forget it. And he invited me in and said, sit down. He was just very kind, and I thought he was just fixing to run me out of the building, because I was country. And I've always been, maybe held too low in esteem for what I do. I've always been extremely humble, but I can't keep from being that way. He said, I like the show very much, but he said, I want to know what happened to all my spirituals.
Oh, yeah.
And I told him then that the agency had gone over it and had made the program out.
Right.
And he said, well, I want you to shove some of the other things out and put some more of them good old spirituals in. And that just tickled me to death. You right know that.
I guess it was late 1958. You signed the recording contract with Cadence Records, and you were also in California performing as a regular on the Compton, California TV show Town Hall Party. Can you give me some details of your signing with Cadence and Right now, I can only discover one 45 release, Light of Love, back with That's Alright. Were there others on the label? Or?
Well, I recorded I recorded 4 songs for Cadence in one session. And to my knowledge, there was only one release.
Yeah, that was I've got the Light of Love.
Right. And I don't even have a copy of that.
You want one?
I would like to have a copy of that.
I've got doubles, several of it, as I'll explain later.
Okay. But then I recorded one that's in the folio that I intend to re-record pretty soon because I love the song very much. It's called The Shepherd of My Soul.
Right, yeah. I've never heard it yet.
You've seen it in the songbook.
I've seen it mentioned in certain articles.
Right.
Wrote Shepherd of My Soul.
Now, it's funny. It shows up on my royalty statement. I'm getting royalties on Shepherd of My Soul, so I wonder if Archie Blau released it somewhere else and I just don't know about it.
Right. The Light of Love single, I do...
and what was on the other side of that?
That Ain't Right.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Can you tell me about the going to California, the Compton, California Town Hall Party?
Town Hall Party?
Yeah.
Yes, that was quite an experience. I had been booked in Las Vegas at the Dunes Hotel, and I was out there for 6 weeks. And my agent, they wanted me to open at the Flamingo upon completing my contract at the Dunes. But at that time, both of my children were just babies, and I was extremely in love with them, and I had them with me. And I wound up being so tired from trying to be mama and entertainer because the sun would be up by the time I would get finished at the Dunes Hotel. And I was doubling with the Ink Spots on the show there and the Step Brothers. Then my manager, who at this time had moved to California, insisted I come out for a rest before I do any other engagements. And I fell in love with the climate, so I decided to move out there. And as a result, I stayed out there for 5 years.
Really?
And he put me on the Town Hall Party, and they wanted to know if I'd become a regular member. Of course, I did, loving to sing like I do. And it was a country audience, just built right in,
There was a lot of country artists that came from that area.
Oh, yeah, Tex Ritter was on the show at that time.
Wanda Jackson?
No, she's Oklahoma City. Tex Ritter and Joe Mavis and Rose Lee.
Yeah. Were the...
and the Collins kids.
Oh, yeah, they did a lot of rock and roll type things.
Right.
What years would that be?
That was like 58, 59. Let's see. I was on it for about 5 years.
Yeah.
I think it's from about 50, in the middle 50s on for 5 years.
In the early 60s, Capitol released, actually it was 1960 and 1961, they released 2 LPs made up of all your single releases, Capitol releases from a decade earlier. Aside from your continuing popularity, can you tell me why they were released at that time, or were you involved with the releases? One's called Satisfy, the other one's called Top of the Lord. Do you have any connection with them? Did they release them independently?
Well, they came back in and re-signed me after I left RCA Victor and moved back to Nashville. They re-signed me, and I did one session for them. And then almost immediately after that, they gathered up all of the backlog of material and put it in the album releases.
Oh, yeah. The one single was High on a Hill, and it was produced by Marvin Hughes.
Right.
High on a Hill, and
It's All Right.
That's all right. That's right. Yeah, and that was recorded. I guess about
about 1961, I believe it was.
Taking us to 1963. 1961. Just recently, I found a Dot single, Right Now, and back with Things Happen for the Best. Can you tell me anything about one single?
Well, now this was when I was out in California.
Oh, yeah.
This was sort of an accident that happened.
Oh, yeah.
And shouldn't have.
Oh, yeah.
But all goes, Wink Martindale, who has the talk show on television.
Yeah, Decker Cards.
Yeah. No, well,
didn't he have a single?
No.
Oh.
No, you're talking about Tex Williams, aren't you?
I think Wink Martindale had a single called Decker Cards.
Well, now maybe he did. But anyway, he has a television talk show now, a game show now.
Right.
But he was at that time working with Dot Records, I think, California. And Dorsey Burnett.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you.
Was it? My husband was booking Dorsey Burnett and his brother Johnny Burnett. And we were living in San Fernando Valley. And Darcy Burnett came over to our house one evening, and he said, Martha, he said, why don't you, he said, sign with Dot Records. He said, they're interested in signing you. And I said, well, I'll talk to them, you know.
Yeah.
So I did, and on my first session, Wink Martindale came over to A&R.
Oh, yeah.
And they picked out what they wanted me to sing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, it was the first time I had ever sung anything in my life other than a spiritual,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
since I had written and recorded Satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I sang other things, but I've never recorded other things, you know. But, of course, I write a lot of other things too, Dave. I wrote the one, Everything Happens for the Best.
Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And, well, I wrote both of those, I believe.
Yeah, and I see Burnett credited on one of them.
Well, I wrote that one when I was at his house.
Oh.
That's how them things happen
There
sometimes.
you go.
He didn't write any of it, though.
Yeah, I see him got the single just a few months ago, and I was surprised to see it. Coming back to 1963, there was an LP released on Sims label out of Nashville, and I love the album. It contains some of my very favorite Martha Carson songs, such as Somebody Told Me, It Takes a Lot of Living. Can you tell me about your details with that label and about the recording sessions? Like the Glazer brothers were on.
It was a real good experience doing the album. I had all key musicians, the best, and I had the Glazer brothers. You can't beat them; they're just great. Tom Paul and the Glazer brothers, and Prissy, Jerry Reed's wife, sang the high parts.
Oh yeah.
And I really enjoyed doing the sessions. And on that particular album, the man that originated the company,
Russell Sims.
right, he gave me a guarantee of so many album sales within a year, or the master of the album would revert back to me.
Oh yeah.
But he didn't have the money to push the album. He was forced to go out of business. So the album reverted back to me. I owned the master of that one.
As far as talking with the Happy Goodman family, they were also on Sims at the same time.
Yeah.
And their albums just didn't get distributed.
No, he didn't have the distributorship or anything set up. I guess
I heard something about a single that was supposed to have been a hit, but he never got the residuals from it or something. And that started the decline of the label.
Well, could have been. I never really knew the details fully.
Yeah, I love that album. I love
Thank you.
Great songs. There's one by your sister, Jean Chow.
Right. I wrote 11 of them. She wrote the other
That's
one.
right, yeah.
She can write so close to the way I feel.
Yeah. I've got a few of her records on Challenge. She's on the Challenge label.
Right.
I'm looking for other ones I haven't been able to find. Again, to the mid-'60s, an album on the gospel label, Scripture, was released and contained what would be called gospel classics. Can you tell me about your association with this label?
Well,
You're out of New Jersey.
this was just a one-time thing. I didn't sign, actually, a contract with them. In other words, they bought my works for one album at a flat rate, and evidently it was pretty successful. This was the first time I had ever recorded an album of just the old standards from back when I was just a little girl. I had heard them sung, but many of them I hadn't sung them as a solo till I was in the studio that day.
Great album.
Just from memory.
It's the first album I've been able to get as far as a stereo record, though.
Uh-huh.
I have a mono copy and a stereo.
Right.
What I found with that album, that on the mono copy, it has only about half the instruments on the stereo. You'd have to listen to the two to determine, but there's no steel guitar in the mono, no harmonica.
Well, now there's a trick. There's a trick. There wasn't when I cut it.
Oh, I see.
When they got the master back to New Jersey, they can do anything.
Yeah, right.
When they got it back to New Jersey, they put a harmonica and a steel guitar in there.
Yeah, right.
And it was funny. I had heard the original master upon the completion, and it didn't have. You don't care if I take my shoes off, do you? But I was at a friend's house, and they played the record for me, and I began to hear a harmonica.
Yeah.
I said, back that up a little bit. And sure enough, and then on the slow ones, I noticed the steel guitar.
That's right. Yeah.
And they had added the two more tracks to it when they got it out in New Jersey.
Because it sounds like, actually, if you listen closely, it doesn't sound like it's from the actual session.
It isn't.
The harmonica is so out front. Like it's not.
That's right. It was done. It was tagged on there later.
Yeah, right. During your many years in gospel music and country music, you must have been in contact with many of its great artists who recorded your original songs, like it's the Blackwood Brothers. I mentioned Clyde McFadden. Can you relate some of the artists that you've crossed paths with,
Oh,
especially
yes.
recording your song?
Dave, you're such a young man. Do you remember the name Johnny Ray?
Oh yeah.
Do you?
Oh yeah, right.
The Cry, the little white cloud that cried.
Yeah.
Okay, this was one of the greatest thrills I think
Yeah.
I ever had was when he recorded two of my songs.
Oh yeah.
And I got the pleasure of meeting him and seeing him work. He's a great entertainer.
Yeah, he's dynamic.
Oh, yeah. And I was playing some fairs out in New York State, and he was going to be at this supper club, and I made it a point to go to see him. And I thought that I had sung it fully, but when he came on stage, I really just thought, I must have just wrote it for him, you know.
Yeah.
He just did it so well.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged me that night in the audience, and this was just the thrill of my lifetime. He told the audience that any time that he had ever had to put his hand in the bag and pull out something to top Cry, he always called on a piece of material that was written by a lady that was in the audience, namely Martha Carson. And then he started singing, "I'm going to walk and talk with my Lord." And he had to come back till he was just drenched with sweat.
Really? Yeah, he is a dynamic singer, right?
Yeah.
I don't have all his records. I must look for the ones that he recorded. One called Johnny Ray Sings the Big Beat, and it's like all old blues songs. That's
Right.
one of my favorite records. It's kind of dynamic.
Right.
He had a great appeal to the black audience because I guess he, like yourself, exuberant and you know, not holding anything back.
No, just letting all that you feel come on out.
Yeah.
You know.
And like yourself, one of a kind performers in that way. Yeah. Gospel music continued to gain popularity in the '60s with artists in many diverse styles. Contemporary gospel, I would mention. Can you give me your thoughts in the way in which gospel music has grown through the years and your own philosophy of the positive and uplifting brand of gospel music you create? What do you feel about today's gospel music? I find a lot of it. I must admit, I'm a lover of the old-time gospel music.
So am I, Dave. So am I.
You know, abandonment and excitement.
The contemporary style, I think to me, it's like going all the way around on the edge of something good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And never really, it's like going around the pie and never getting a piece of it, to me.
Yeah.
I think that the soul feeling of gospel music is to get right in the middle of it. You know, the happiness of it and the trueness of it. I don't think you have to write around it to tell the story, because you're not telling much of a story if you tell it that way. Yeah. It don't project the happiness to me.
The positiveness.
Really.
Right.
Well, I feel like that we all need all the help that we can get to keep us lifted up in our spirit. Right. Really.
I was going to ask you about, I've seen in various small magazine articles that you signed with Decca Records in 1967.
No, that never materialized.
And can you just give me a bit of a summary of your activities during the 1970s? Did you retire?
Well, for about 15 years, I decided to more or less stay away from road shows, just do local things once in a while, because I had two young sons, and I had made a promise with God, because going back before they were ever born, I had been told by doctors so many different cities that I could never be able to have a baby, and I had gone to the main doctor with my problem, and I had a revelation from God that I would someday be a mother. But in the meantime, while I was praying to have a child, I made a promise to God that I would stay home and raise him to the best of my ability. So I was compelled to be there. So if they needed their little hiney spanked for doing wrong, then I needed to be there to do it. I wasn't keeping my bargain if I was in Mississippi somewhere and they, you know what I mean? So then after they got grown and they began to get around, and people knew Martha Carson was their mother, then they began to come back to him. Mommy, why don't you get back and singing? Everybody loves you, you know? And so...
There was a time for raising your family.
Really, that's it. I never actually retired to that extent, but I limited what I was doing enough to be home with them, and I have two fine sons. One now is vice president of a big bank in Columbia, Tennessee, and is very happily married, and the other one, I reckon he's just going to be like me.
Oh, yeah.
He plays drums.
Oh, yeah.
He plays in my unit now when I go on road shows.
Oh, yeah.
And he's very good. He sings bass.
Oh, yeah.
Got a big bass voice.
Oh, yeah.
And they're both very handsome young men.
Oh, very good. In Kentucky, my friend has been in contact with a man who's since retired. I guess he would be close to his 80s now, but at one time he had a chain of record stores in Nashville, Louis Buckley. Have you ever heard of him?
I've heard of him, but I've never met him.
Oh, yeah. Now he's, like I said, retired, but he has two big warehouses in Guthrie, Kentucky, and he has a whole bunch of 70, like they're all
my
new.
word, wouldn't you love to go up there and play in them records?
The other thing is, it's so frustrating because he won't let you. Like, he has 45s. There's a lot of 45s that are old, like they're in bins, and you can look through them. But all the 78s are all in boxes. He keeps saying that in a future date he's going to organize them so people can at least get at them and that. But until then, he won't let anyone touch them. But I know he has records by Minnie, Maddie, and Martha, Young King, and a lot of your solo records, and a few of the James and Martha Carson. So it's frustrating for me to know that they're there.
Wouldn't you know it would be frustrating for me? Kind of keep an eye on that.
Yeah, because they're all.
If he ever needs any help, we'll come down.
That's right. Yeah, we'll organize. But I mean, they're all, they're all new. They're like in the boxes they came in, I guess. So it's something to look forward to. I was going to say, in the song folio, I know the obvious ones that are recorded on Capitol. Can you tell me if any other ones were, ones that weren't on Capitol? Or like, did you? I was going to ask you did you record "I Can't Stand Up Alone" or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've yet to come across a copy. Is it on the Rock My Soul? Again, I probably don't have all your records.
I believe that's on the Rock of My Soul record.
Yeah, that's something to look forward to. As I mentioned, Clyde McFadder.
Oh, I've got to tell you another little story.
Yeah,
I'm talking too much.
No, you're not. It's fine.
We got enough time?
Yeah, it's fine.
Speaking of I Can't Stand Up Alone, RCA had this network television show that all of the RCA Victor stars are doing. It's called Galaxy of Stars.
Oh, yeah.
You may have seen it. So they had me scheduled to do 2 songs. They had Georgia Gibbs, J.P. Morgan, and this was 2 of the ladies in pop, in the pop songs, and they had me, and then they had each one of us doing 2 songs. Then they had Vaughn Monroe on there, and I forget how many other artists, but anyway, all RCA. It's called RCA Galaxy of Stars. So we had to report for rehearsal to the television show at 7 o'clock one morning, and they I had to bring my music there and everything. So they brought me up. I guess they got to me about 8:30 or 9 o'clock to run 1 song. And he says, "Just have a seat, Miss Carson. We'll get together the song in a few minutes." So immediately I saw some things starting happening. The 2 girls were buzzing the producer, the producer's ear. And it gets to be noon, and my husband's sitting here beside me. He said, "My goodness, when are they going to call you up to do that other song? I'm getting hungry." I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Well, go up there and ask me." I said, I can't go up there and, I said, "When they get ready for me, they'll call me." So I said, "Are you that hungry?" "Oh, yeah." He said, "I'm starved." I said, "Well," and I was getting uncomfortable because I could feel these other girls didn't feel like that I had the credits that they had because they had sold to a more vast audience than I had, that they were chiseling away at getting me off of the show in some way. You feel those things
you can feel
as
that,
well as see it.
Yeah.
So I didn't let on like I knew this was going on. I just walked over to the producer and I said, "Mr. Cates," Joe Cates was his name. So I said, "Incidentally, Mr. Cates," I said, "do you think I'd have time before you run my next song to go and have a bite of lunch?" He said, "Oh," he said, "by the way," and he puts his hand up on his chest, he said, "I am so sorry, Miss Carson." He said, I apologize." He said, "We're going to have to strike that other song." You see, the other girls had scored their target.
Really?
So I became not that I was hurt because I wasn't getting to sing 2 songs, but just to think of such a dirty trick, And here I am up there in New York where I don't want to be anyhow. And so I start walking down the hill to Broadway to find a restaurant to eat in. And I tell you, I'm not a crybaby, David, but I had my throat just felt like it had a lump in there bigger than my fist could be. And I felt like if I didn't cry, I was just going to just drop over.
Yeah.
So we get into the restaurant, and it's just packed full of people, busy. And I thought, well, I'll go to the ladies' room where I can cry. And I think every lady in New York City had the same idea. So there wasn't no place for me to hide and cry. So I came back out and I sat down at the table with my husband. The waiter brought the menus out and passed them around, and I just shook my head. And if I ever spoke out loud, it would be an outburst of tears.
Yeah.
So I knew if I could just keep it all quiet, I could hold it till I could get some words to cry. But all of a sudden, an inspiration came to me.
Yeah.
And I just reached my hand out, and my husband put a pen in it. And there was a paper napkin on the table.
Yeah.
And that's where I wrote, I can't stand up alone.
What a story.
And I went back up to the rehearsal and I went over to Mr. Cates, and I guess he thought I was completely crazy, and he may still think so. I never have explained it to him, but I said, Mr. Cates, I want to thank you. He said, for what? I said, for bringing about an inspiration that caused me to write possibly one of the best songs I'll ever write in my life. Yeah. He looked at me like I was completely gone, called a wagon. But then I recorded it for RCA, and I organized my own publishing company at that time, Marpat Music. And then Clyde McFadder came out with it. It was on the backside of Elvis Question, sold over 1 million.
Right, yeah.
So did Mr. Cates. You see, everything works together for good to them that love the Lord.
For sure. Yeah, it's an amazing story, yeah. As far as other people recording it, one of your, the Blackwood brothers did it also.
Oh, they did it, and then Jesse Winchester. Do you know him?
Oh, yeah.
He grew up in Kansas
somewhere.
Yeah,
he put out quite a few albums in the 70s.
Right, he did it.
Yeah, I must look for his version. Really? That's
he
great.
sure did. Yeah, it's been recorded several times. Yeah. And then there was another group, I can't recall their name now. They had a group name, and right now it don't register. Yeah. But I have their, and it was the title song of their album.
Yeah. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Were they a gospel group or?
No, it was just a sort of a young group.
Oh yeah, great. Now I was going to ask about the Star Day album. I guess that was recorded in the late 70s.
Right.
And did someone approach you about that?
Yes. Tommy Hill, who was A&R for the Gusto Records, approached me to do this, and at that time I was free, and it was something I could do in town and be at home at night with the children and all that. Yeah. So I went over and I put it all together. Yeah.
There's a lot of songs there worth saying, maybe about 7 or 8 songs that I had never heard before.
Right. These were songs that I had written while I was home raising the children.
Right.
So you see, this is why I say I never completely got out of it. Because I could be washing dishes and have an inspiration for a song and run and hide off somewhere and write it.
And there's always a time.
It comes a time that I need that song to see.
And now, coming to the present, can you give me details of your current career activities and the plans you have for that direction?
Well, I have reorganized a band, and we've been doing the network shows and television shows here in Nashville, and plan to be doing some more of them. We've been doing some road concerts, and our plans are now to go in and do a new album this fall.
Will you, as far as the album, record it and then present it to a company? Or?
No. It will be for an individual who will distribute the album.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'll look forward to hearing that, that's for sure.
And he says he's going to put all of the new Nashville sound behind me, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, yeah. That sounds very exciting. The more Martha Carson records, the better.
Thank you.
I think that's pretty well as far as I was going to ask about your sister's activities now.
They both live in the Nashville area.
Yeah.
Occasionally we get together and sing and play. And our mother's still living. She lives in Ohio now.
Great. Oh, yeah.
And she was down about a month ago, and we all had a big homecoming over at my house.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Got our guitars and fiddles and banjos and just had at it.
That'd be wonderful. Last time I was down here, the weather was so bad I was going to go up to Neon just to soak up the local color. Have you ever been back?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I just...
It would be an experience, really.
Just get the atmosphere of the story. I might, I'll be up in, like I said, I'll probably be up in Kentucky next couple of days before I leave. I might be too far out of the way. I might go up there.
Well, when you get this as far as you can go up one of them hollers, you'll know you're there. Honey.
Really? Oh, yeah. What's the...
Neon, Kentucky.
Maybe a magical place to go, just going there, finding it, and then being there. I guess imagine life hasn't changed that much, really. It's not built up for too much, is it?
Well, I think they do have better roads,
I've
heard. And I haven't been back there in a number of years.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think that's, as far as information, that's fantastic. That'll be really helpful.
Well, good.
It'll, really, what I hope to do,